Hello everyone, welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We are going to get started. I would like to welcome this week to our webinar, we have Kathy from Enprise Software Solutions who's going to be leading the presentation.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming along today, and thank you Joanna for inviting me to participate in this regular session of yours. You will have seen from the agenda that Bonnie sent out that today I'm going to be talking about an add-on product for SAP Business One called Enprise Job. And Encaptis do know this product well. They've implemented it a few times. So if there's anything you like, when you see it as you go through, certainly Encaptis can help you with that. Right, so I'm trying not to do too many PowerPoints because I know it's often in these sessions like this is just death by PowerPoint, and I'm sure you'd rather see some software. So I'll go through a few slides and then we'll get into showing you the product and what it looks like. Let's see if I can make my next slide go. That would be a trick. Here we go. Okay, so what I'm going to cover today, I've got just under an hour to do this. A little background about Enprise and who we are if you haven't heard of us before, and then Enprise Job. Now we do have several add-ons, I think 8 or 9 at the last count, but today we're just concentrating on this one. So at the end of this slideshow, I'll have our web address for you if you want to go and look at some of our other add-ons, download the brochures, things like that. So we're going to look at Enprise Job, just, what is it, why should you have it? Of course you should all have it, but I'll try and convince you of that. How does it work, a little bit of a process flow of how we're going to, what we're going to look at in the product, and then I'll do a demonstration. Okay, so a little bit about us. We just had our 10th anniversary in December last year. We started out, Enprise actually started out with another ERP product called Exonet that we wrote. So in fact our CEO wrote it. And we started out as a consulting company with that, and then he sold it to another company, and it's a very big product now throughout Australasia. So we still have a division of our company that consults and implements on that product. And around 2000, I think it was the end of 2003 when SAP Business One was launched into our part of the world. They picked it up, had a look at it, and decided that it was a really nice product. So became a reseller partner for that, and then very quickly looked at it and said, well, actually there's some features that we use in our other product that we think Business One should have. So that was the first product they wrote around 2005, released in 2006 was our job costing product. So we've had a few awards over the years. I haven't put them all in, there wouldn't be room. Last year we were I think the number 2 add-on partner in North America in terms of, and the way SAP rates that is how many Business One deals they get with that add-on attached to it. So, we were their number 2. I think it was Q3 and Q4 last year. We do have our CEO he's the chairman of the Software Partner Advisory Council. So this isn't a council that meets with SAP every few months, and they're quite powerful. They have a lot of influence over SAP. We do work through a channel of partners such as Encaptis. So we have partners in, I think it's 20 countries, but I tend to lose count. Okay, so what is it? It's an add-on product for Business One that lets you track and manage jobs. When I say job, I could also be saying project. They're kind of interchangeable. So what it will let you do is, for a job, estimate that or quote on it, track what actually happens. So I have, my quote is what I expect to happen. That's, how much I expect this job to cost me. And then I can track what actually happens, so that's through transactions such as timesheets of staff, usage of materials, usage of resources, and then I can invoice my customer based on can invoice them based on the quote, I can invoice them my actuals, or we do have the concept of milestone billing. So that would be an example, for example, where I have a job for a customer. We've done all the contract negotiations, and the agreement is that perhaps they will pay 25% the day we start, and then we may have some other milestones throughout the project. They'll pay another 25% at a certain time, so we can handle that as well. So the transactions we're talking about, staff time, expenses, these could also be reimbursable expenses. So perhaps it's a staff member out in the field, they've had to go to a local hardware store, maybe they're a service tech, they've had to go to a hardware store to buy something, so that they can complete their job, so they can enter that against the job, so that's a material used on the job, but also if it's reimbursable, then it will create an AP invoice back in Business One. Okay, why should you use it? I guess the control aspect is the most important. So it's one place where you can track everything that's happening. You can start to get real information on how much the work that you're doing is costing you. As an example, one of our customers, they have service techs, and obviously they're using jobs to manage all of those, but also they have a training facility, so they run training courses. And what they started doing was creating jobs to manage the training courses, and what they quickly found out was it wasn't financially viable. The guy who was doing the training, perhaps he had to fly to another city to do it. Maybe there was only 3 people on the training course, and he had to do, by the time they got him tracking everything he did to run that training course, they found out they were losing money on them. So that's just an example of once you start capturing all that information. A lot of companies who are using, in fact, a lot of our reseller partners are using SAP Business One internally to run their consulting business, and they're also running Enprise Job, so they can really keep track on their projects that way. Okay, what else have I got on this slide? It goes without saying, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the concept of an add-on with SAP Business One, but it's really tightly controlled by SAP. So we have to use the SDK, the Software Development Toolkit, which is the same product that SAP used to write Business One. To be certified in that product, we have to send our code to the SAP labs. They pull it apart, they run it, they make sure that we're doing everything properly. So it is really, truly, integrated product. So the user doesn't even necessarily need to know they're going into somewhere else. Okay, just a quick slide on the structure here. So what we have is the concept of a master job and sub-jobs. So the sub-jobs is where all the work happens. So that's where the transactions are entered. But the master job is where I can get an overall picture of what's happening. And some of the uses for sub-jobs is depending on the way, on what your requirements are and the way you set up the system. You may just have one sub-job on your jobs, you may have many. If you're going to have many, they could perhaps be used to distinguish between project phases, change variations to a project, so you may have quoted and agreed on some work and you'll be capturing that, but then a change variation comes along. So creating that as another sub-job is a really simple way to keep track of those costs. It's not to say that you can't invoice all of that, all together at the end of the month. It's just that you are able to individually track it. Okay, the broad flow of what I'm going to show you today, we'll look at a job. I'll show you, in fact, I'll probably do that the other way around. I'll probably look at the quoting first and then the job. Then I'm going to look at some transactions, then the web interface, then I'll show you the scheduling, and then the job invoicing. Okay, that's enough of PowerPoints. I'd like to just jump into the product here and give you a flavour of it. If I can find where I am. Okay, so here's Business One. I'm running in a Business One 8.82 environment, patch level 9. I don't have a cockpit set up, but of course those are all features available in standard Business One. Just to show you, also I have over here some alerts. So these alerts are written off the Enprise Job costing tables. So just to let you know that those tables, are inside the same database as Business One. So any of your queries, alerts, can access that information as well as standard Business One information. All right, now to create jobs, I've lost count of how many ways there are, but I'm going to tell you about the three main ways. The first one is to key it manually, of course. But we do interface with two other areas of standard Business One. So if I just come into the sales area and bring up a sales quotation. Okay, use my navigation buttons. Here's a quote. You'll notice there is a new button down on the bottom right side of the screen here, Create Job. So I can from a sales quote, I can click that button, I can create the job that will track the work for this, and it will take, or I can tell it how much of the information on this quote to pull forward into the job. So I can choose which of those lines are going through. I could also, if I have a bill of materials, that will explode out here, and then I can push that through as well into a job if I'm using it for some kind of manufacturing process. The other place where we link through is from service calls. These are just standard Business One screens here. If I look at this service call, you'll notice again I have a button at the bottom for Enprise Job, and a job has already been created. I can see this from the user-defined fields that are tracked here when the job is created, and so from here I can go to the job, go to the sub-job, that kind of thing. If I didn't have a job created off the service call, that button would say Create Job. Yeah, so we've got a lot of companies out there who are using the service integration side of it, because if you create a job from your service call, it just extends the functionality of that service call so much, so you can then start having much more flexible invoicing options. You can also use our web time entry, so if you have technicians out in the field, that the call can still be created here, but then a job would be created off that, and it's the job that the technician will be putting all his time and expenses against. And I will show you one of those screens and even show you how the technician can get a sign-off from the customer on site, get their signature on a document to say everything's done. Okay, now I'm just going to jump straight into Enprise Job. I was just going to mention quickly that we do have language reference files, LRF files, just like Business One, so you can change the name of this. If it makes more sense for your staff to see a menu entry that says projects, for example, that can very easily be changed. And we also have a couple of languages we're bringing out now. So we've just launched our French language translation, and a German one is coming soon. Okay, now I can use the job management screen to create a new job, but the place that I tend to hang out most is this My Job screen. So from here I can create new jobs. You'll see I've got a new button at the bottom. I can copy jobs, so maybe I have a concept of a template job that I want to copy. Or I can look at these attributes that I have on the jobs. So these are all of these are defined by the customer, when you install the product. So we don't determine what your job statuses, for example, must be, or your job types. So given these attributes, I can, tick the ones I want. So look, I just want to look at, my in-progress jobs, that kind of thing. In this case, I might want to look at them all. Maybe, just my jobs, being the project manager. Hit the search button. And this is where I can quickly find my jobs. Okay, I could also, if I'm using multiple sub-jobs, I could be looking at it with a view that shows me the sub-jobs, so I can drill straight into those. I tend not to do that. And I have a search screen where I can, type any part of the information in here, and it will again filter those. So this is just a quick and easy way of finding jobs to manage. Now, I do have one I prepared earlier. No, I do have a job I was working on in a demo the other day, and it happens to have lots of information on it. So I'm just going to bring that job up and walk you through some of the screens to show you some of the information we have. And apologies, my screen has started flickering, and I think it's a memory issue, but I hope it doesn't affect us too much today. Alrighty, so what do we have? We've got a job here, 1178. Information is presented to me in some tabs, so I can see all the different things about this job. Remember, I said we have sub-jobs linked to an overall job. So these tabs here will be showing me the overall picture of the job. If I want to see individual information on any of, I may have many sub-jobs here, then I would drill into the sub-job to see that. Also, just before I move on, I wanted to mention this kind of blank area up in the top here. So we have the facility for you to be able to create your own user-defined fields within here. So in the transactional grids on the lines, you can create user-defined fields. You can create user-defined fields on the header, and they would be up here. Here's one called test. And we also allow you to create, to put buttons onto the header here that are linked to reports. So for example, I may have a report on my report menu, which is, job profitability, but then maybe I have to select which job or jobs I want to look at. Whereas if I run the report from within the job, then it pre-populates the job number into that report selection screen, and I just get the report coming up just for that job. Okay. Now, some of these screens look a little busy. I will confess that. There's a lot of information. Now, in reality, in a real-life implementation, you wouldn't need to see all that information. So we do have available the standard SAP form settings button, so that in any of our grids you can come along, you can hide the fields you don't want to see, you can move the fields around to different order. So that's standard Business One processing. Okay, so what I'm looking at here now is the quote for my job. Because I'm at the overall job level, I'm seeing the quote entries for all sub-jobs, and I only have one sub-job. So I have some materials here that I said I want to use on this job, so I have quantities for those. There's quite a bit of flexibility around what my costs and my sell prices are for staff and for inventory. So for example, for a staff member, I could have a specific rate that I sell that staff member out at, Sophie. So maybe, maybe her rate for project management is $225 an hour, or I can have the rate come from the item, which is the project management. So Sophie can have a rate, or the item, the work, can have a rate, and the way that is handled is through the price lists in Business One. So for this item, for this customer, Norm Thompson, perhaps I have a completely different rate that I charge him for that. Okay. And you'll notice I've kind of just got a couple of lines here. These are both staff lines, and this is some project management and some general labour. Here I've said that Sophie is expected to do the work so that I can later on, analyse my variances. What did I quote? How many hours did I quote for Sophie? How many hours did she actually do? Or I can leave that article off. So I could just have, for example, here labour time, I'm saying 30 hours. So I can, then my reports will show me, I expected 30 hours of time, and then how many did we actually use, irrespective of who the employee was doing it. Okay, now on this sub-job, I just want to talk about a couple of, on the quote screen, I just want to talk about a couple of other things that you can do with Enprise Job. This stock check button is kind of like, I don't know if any of you know the MRP process through the standard Business One manufacturing module, but the stock check works a lot like the MRP process. So what I can do for this job, for example, I have some materials that I want to use on the job. I've also put down here some subcontractor labour, which is a non-stocked item that is purchasable. So I'm going to raise a purchase order for that subcontractor to do some work for me. So when I hit the stock check button, it goes through and it looks at everything I need. So if I have the items in stock, so for my material type items, if they're in stock, it will create a stock transfer, a standard Business One stock transfer document, which is transferring the stock from my warehouse into my work in progress warehouse, which is where I'm capturing all the costs for the job. If I don't have enough of the item in stock, it will suggest to me that perhaps I need to raise a purchase order to buy that. And just like in the MRP screen, I can override that and I can purchase more if I want, and I can change who the supplier is going to be, that kind of thing. And for the example where I have my subcontractor, which is a purchasable non-stock item, it'll also raise a purchase order for that as well if I want it to. So that's the stock check with inside a job, commonly used if you're doing a manufacturing type scenario. We also have a bulk stock check. So at the beginning of a week, for example, you could do the stock check across all the jobs that are perhaps ready to go into production or at a certain status. It will then accumulate purchase orders to the same supplier. So I may have 15 jobs that I'm doing this week, and they all need items from one supplier, so it will generate one purchase order, but each different line on the purchase order would perhaps be relating to a different job. And another button I do just want to mention while I'm on here is job activities. So these are standard, for those of you who know the kind of CRM features inside Business One. This is a standard Business One activity, but it's linked to a particular employee who's going to work on this particular job. So this, once the activity is created, of course you have the standard Business One calendar, which will show the activities, and if you're linked with Outlook, then they can see that on their Outlook calendar. It can also be used in our web timesheet entry. So when you're putting in web timesheets, you can perhaps set it up so that the employee will only see those jobs that they have activities for that they're supposed to be working on. Okay. The actual transaction tab here is, as I said, an overall view against all the sub-jobs of what's happened so far. I can drill into any of these to see the underlying transactions behind the scenes. I could also, if I had the right authorizations, I'm in the staff timesheet, I have a new button, so I can create timesheets from here as well. Actually, I might just mention this a little more. In the staff timesheet entry, which you can get to from, I got to that from inside a job, although we do also have obviously a transaction menu under Enprise Job. So in here we have the time entry, materials entry, all of those things going on as well. I just wanted to show you a couple of buttons in the bottom right corner of this form. One is the web import, so if timesheets have been entered through the web, we can pull them in here. I could automate that with a batch job behind the scenes, but if I do use the option to pull it in here, then I will get the option to perhaps, save those as draft and get someone to review it. Although we also do have an approval process for timesheets inside the web product as well. And the other button here is the Excel clipboard. So what this means is I could have an Excel spreadsheet where I enter all my time, and then perhaps send it to an administrator type person on a Monday morning, and they would open up my spreadsheet, they would highlight the rows, do the copy, come in here and then click the Excel clipboard button, which does the paste. And as long as the first row that they copy out of that spreadsheet has the exact same words in it as the top row of all these columns, then it will pull that information through just using a cut and paste. And it doesn't matter what order those are in. An example actually of where this is used, and you can get quite fancy with spreadsheets. So I know of a company who has a lot of service techs in the field. For whatever reason, they didn't want them to use the web timesheet entry, so they've issued each of those techs a spreadsheet. And during the week, as they're doing the work, they put, what job they're working on, how many hours, the comments, things like that, into that spreadsheet, send it to Sarah back in the office, and she cuts them into here. But what they've done is they've got kind of fancy with that spreadsheet. So they've put some ODBC links in there back to the database so that when the tech, for example, it knows there's a field at the top of the spreadsheet that says what department he belongs to. So when he goes into the job field and he's choosing which job he worked on, the drop down is only showing him the current active jobs for his department, that kind of thing. So you can get quite fancy with spreadsheets, which on the face of it sounds like a low-tech option, but it can be very useful. Oops, no, I didn't want to shut down Business One. What the heck am I doing? I want to shut this screen. Phew. Okay. And I can see my actual materials exactly the same way as the staff time. I can enter materials here from the job, or I do have my option on the transactional menu to do this. And last week we put a new version of the product, and we also introduced a new type of transaction. So rather than having to purchase the whole Enprise Job add-on for a user, if all they do is this kind of information, they're a backroom person, they don't have to create jobs, they're just perhaps keying in materials and time and things like that, and doing stock returns, then there is a special license for them, which is a fraction of the price of a full license. Okay. Now we're also really closely integrated with the purchasing side of SAP Business One. So for a particular job, I can purchase for that job. And what that means is that whatever materials or services I'm purchasing, the actual cost of those will be captured on the job. If I was just, for example, needing a stock item on a job and I pulled it out of my standard inventory, well then I get the, it'll be doing a stock transfer, of course, onto the job, but it uses the standard Business One rules of what the cost of that item will be. So that may be an average cost, for example. But if I'm purchasing something specifically for a job, I will want the actual cost of that purchase on this job, because perhaps I had to, air freight it in. Perhaps I had to buy it from a different supplier this time because I needed it, quicker than the other supplier could give it to me, and the cost is different. So that will affect the profitability of this particular job, so I do want to keep those tied together. And you'll see if I drill into here, that it is linking straight to a standard Business One purchase order. I can also, if I came into this screen first, I can also create the purchase order just from Business One, and what I would then do on the line is I would tell it which job I'm purchasing for. So that also has the effect of linking them together, rather than using the new button down here to create a new purchase order specifically for the job. And of course you've got, you can do the standard, once you have a purchase order in the system, then you can use the standard Business One process of goods receipts and invoices. I didn't have to start here with a purchase order. I could have perhaps just received the AP invoice, key that into Business One and link it to the job, so it would appear here. So this subcontractor expense, I actually did order it, but then it went straight to an invoice, or I could have just loaded the invoice straight off. Okay, invoicing tab. This is kind of like the engine room, I guess, of Enprise Job. This is where we have a lot of choice in how we're going to invoice the customer. Now you'll see here I have some transactions. So these are transactions that have been processed against this job, some materials, some staff time. I can, here I've chosen in the top left corner, you'll see, to exclude what's been processed already. So if I had already invoiced a lot of stuff, I can hide that so that I'm only ever looking at, what's ready to be invoiced. Now I'm going to spend just a few minutes going through some of the invoicing options, but first of all I want to mention this. So you'll see I have this big red thing here that says it's a contract job. What I've done in this job is set up some milestone billing. So if I come into the contract button, and waiting, okay, I've set up some phases. So, maybe when the contract was accepted, I'll take a down payment, $4,000, that kind of thing. So I'm setting up my milestones. I can also set up, a retention percentage or value against those. And I can invoice directly from here. So I process the invoices now. The retention will end up down in this area, so I can see what's still to go, and then I can invoice those as required. Just a quick comment or something to note about if you're using the contract invoicing. What you're doing is you're raising an invoice, but you haven't done the work yet, perhaps, if it's a deposit invoice, for example. So according to international accounting rules, I can't recognize the revenue on that invoice until the work has been done. So what's happening behind the scenes? Yes, an invoice is being generated, but instead of the posting in the financial system to your revenue account, it's actually posting to a deferred revenue account. Then once you've done the work, there's another process to say, what does the button say? It's in here. Sorry, I'm just closing the screen. There is this option, process the contract lines. So I've already invoiced, and now I'm processing the lines, and that will clear out that deferred revenue and put that from my balance sheet into my income statement under revenue. Okay, but I can also, so I can force it so that I can only invoice from those contracts, or I can also allow, maybe change variations, etc., to be invoiced separately as well. So I've got a whole bunch of options here. I'm not going to go into the screens to show you. I'll just quickly talk about them. Invoicing job lines is your pure time and material kind of invoicing. Okay, so this is where once I've set the line is ready to process, so it starts out as entered, and then I can set it to ready to process. So my invoice job lines is just taken those straight through to invoices. And of course your invoice layout may show every line, or it may show, you know, depending on the layout that you've designed, it may show one entry per sub-job, or perhaps it may reflect back to the original quote lines. So you've got all those options. The invoicing with over or under recovery is where I'm actually choosing how much to invoice in these cases. It gives me another screen where I can say perhaps I want to invoice a percentage of my quoted value. So maybe I'm halfway through the job, I want to just invoice half of my quote value so far. Or I can choose a specific value to invoice. So perhaps it's a $20,000 job. We're actually halfway through it and we want to invoice the $10,000, but we haven't perhaps applied some of the larger material costs onto here yet, but I can still invoice, you know, exactly how much I want to that month. And the other option is make to stock. So this is where you're using a job as kind of like a production job. So effectively all the transactions that have been captured onto that job are components. And then once I do the make to stock, I define what stock item I've made from this job, and that could be, you know, several items. It could be co-products, byproducts, whatever. So I define what I've made from the job, and then what percentage of the costs of the job apply to that item, and then it puts them into stock. And I can optionally invoice them straight away as well. So that's another use for this. Just to quickly give you an example of someone who's using this, there's a customer who is a book publisher. So they don't actually make the books, they just sell them. So what they'll do is they'll create a job for, you know, 1,000 new books, and then they'll just they'll raise 4 purchase orders against that job. That's all they do, because everything is outsourced. So one purchase order is for the supplier who does the printing. You know, perhaps another one does the artwork, another one binds the books together, and then, you know, maybe another one packages it all up. So once all that work is done and they've received those 4 invoices and created them as AP invoices, then they just come into here and say make to stock, and they say put 1,000 books into stock. So the books go into stock at the actual cost to them, and then, you know, they use the standard Business One sales process from there to sell them. I also have, talking about invoicing, I have a button down here which will show me what invoices, you know, I've raised already. So did I press that? Here we go. So I haven't invoiced anything from this job, but I could see the invoices. If I had, I could drill into them, you know, any credits raised against this job, deliveries done, payments, did I make any stock? So I can see all of those and reprint, you know, invoices from here if I need to. Although, just to say, when I do create the invoice from here, I am creating it inside my add-on, but it is creating a standard AR invoice inside Business One with all the requisite, you know, financial postings. Okay, how are we doing for time? We're good on time. I wanted to show you, that's just a real quick, high level, what a job is, what it looks like, some of the things you can do with a job. I would like to show you our scheduling module as well. So let me shut this down. From Enprise Job, I have an entry here called the Job Scheduler. Let me click this. Pretty colourful screen. Now this screen here, if I just move it away off my window, you'll see that it's not pinned or stuck inside the Business One window. It's a separate window. So if I'm the scheduler, I could have a separate monitor over to the side of my workstation, and I could move this window over onto that separate monitor and use it like that. Okay, there are actually 3 panes to this. The first one is a search is defining my search criteria to define what I want to see in these two areas. So I could be looking at, perhaps I'm only looking at certain types of jobs, or only jobs managed by a certain person, that kind of thing. Then I can close that down to give myself a bit more space. So what I'm seeing here, on the left, I'm seeing my staff and my resources, and optionally you can put these into teams. Perhaps if you're tracking, maybe you're a transportation company and you're moving big pieces of equipment all over the country, you may have a team put together, which is a truck, the vehicle, plus the driver, plus perhaps two hands who are needed to go with that truck to unload and load. So you could put them all together as a team, or you could schedule people individually. That's up to you. Behind the scenes, we have a calendar. We have a company calendar that says, we start work at this time in the morning and we finish at this time in the evening, so we know how many hours we have available. And each staff member will inherit those hours from the company calendar. So you'll see they're all getting the 45 hours here. But I could go into a staff member through their employee record and change that to say, well, actually, Michael doesn't work Wednesdays, or maybe he works late on this day and finishes early, that kind of thing. So this is letting me keep track of how much available time I have for a person and what time I've allocated them in my schedule already. There's some color coding here, so we have all sorts of setups where you can say, here we go, the allocated indicator. So the green here means they're allocated for less than 25% of their time. Yellow, between 25–50%, that kind of thing. You'll also notice there's colors all over the place here. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. I'll just turn my microphone. Back again. So the job status, for example, here, you'll notice my job status is pink on these and green on these. That can be useful, well, not only for the scheduler to see it, but one of the options through the web timesheet entry is to change the status of a job. So a technician could take a job, and maybe it's ready to go. He can work on it, and then he can change the status in the web time feature, and it will instantly change the color of what he's working on over here, so that the scheduler can see, oops, okay, he's working on it now, or he's finished the job now. Okay, just scroll down a bit, look at the job we were looking at earlier, 1178. Okay, so here's that job. If I want to book someone to work on the job, it's a matter of picking them up and dragging them. So in this case, I want sales manager to work on this production job here. So here he is, and now I will just schedule when I want him to work on. It's warning me that if I look somewhere up in the schedule, he's already planned to work on a job, but I can override that. It may be valid for him to be scheduled more than one thing at once. Okay, so once I have that on here, I can obviously move it around. I can drill into it, double click, I think, yeah, I can see information. I can add some notes about this. My great typing. In the new version that we published last week, although I haven't had a chance to load it yet, I can also drag this bar onto another job. So at the moment I can drag it across to different time or day, but in the new version I can also drag it across different jobs. And although I'm seeing, this as a day view, I can also see, it as an hour or a week or every 15 minutes, that kind of thing. And you'll notice I just wanted to point out we do have some jobs here. It's possible to also, if you want to track 100% of everyone's time, you could have internal jobs. So for here, example 1002 is an internal type job. So sick leave is a certain sub-job, Annual leave is another sub-job off that, statutory holidays, so that people can code their time during the week to those jobs. So A, you can then track that they are working their full 40, 45 hours a week because you know that all their time is in. B, you can start tracking some of these internal things. So you know, maybe internal company meetings or downtime, something like that, you may want to track that separately. You can create jobs for those. And there is a separate place where I can go in. If I know someone will be on annual leave, I can set them up to say that during these dates they'll be on annual leave, and it will appear in the calendar here, so I can see that they're unavailable, or I can actually see that they're fully, you know, allocated. Okay, here we go. I've got 10 minutes left. Just one other thing to note here. I can set the system up so that when I plan someone to work on a job, that will create a BusinessOne activity for that person. So A, they're going to see it in their calendar and perhaps even their Outlook calendar if you've turned on that integration. And also in the web timesheet we can cut it down so that they only see things that they're planned to work on. And if I was, just to show you the way the team works, if I grab the team and move them onto a job, then I plan them all together. So what I plan for one plans for everyone. When I move it, they all move. But I could right-click and say remove that person from the group. So Tom, I can plan him separately, that kind of thing. Okay. I can also, I keep thinking of things I can do with this. I can also process a timesheet. So I could set up the time here and then push that back to timesheets. I can also create a quote, create the estimate on the job from the schedule. Okay. Now the last thing I wanted to show you was the just what the web timesheet entry looks like. Now I apologize for the first screen that comes up here, just because this user manager is kind of like the administrator of the system. I get an extra screen that no other person would see. Oops, will it load me? Okay, so normally you wouldn't see this screen. Normally you would see something like this. So here I can see the timesheets that I've entered. I've got quite a few ways to enter new timesheets. You know, I can just drill straight into a time and a day and say I'm entering time. Another way to do it, I can see the activities, so I can come in here, see the activities that are assigned to me. I can come in and do a search of the sub-jobs that I'm supposed to be working on. So I can see all of these here, and if I drill into the sub-job information, this is where I can do things like change the status of the job, so that for the planner they may see, you know, perhaps a different color. I can change, you know, when the sub-job starts, information like that. And from this screen, so there's kind of like a few ways to do it. If I'm entering materials, I can enter them up here, expenses, my time, or once I've come into a sub-job, from here I can also enter expenses, materials, attachments. Perhaps I've taken a photograph of some, you know, maybe I'm a service tech and I take a photo of what I'm working on before and after, so I could, you know, attach those, that kind of thing. I can enter my time, and another thing that I can do is while I'm on, you know, on site, I go to the signature screen. I can bring up the screen to show the customer. So here's my job. He can see already the timesheets, you know, what work has been done on the job. So that would include any work that I've just put in right now, any expenses, the materials I've used on the job. I would, you know, perhaps type in here what I've done, the resolution, and then I can hand it to him, give him the stylus, and get him to put his signature on there. So saving that, and I won't do it because I haven't got the report set up in here, so saving that will create a job report. which can be saved as a PDF and then emailed to the customer separately. Okay, so let me just come back here to my PowerPoint. Oops, that was the wrong one, wasn't it? Here we go. So that was, yeah, in a real quick nutshell, Enprise Job. So as I said before, Encaptis, you know, are a valued partner of ours. They are trained in the product. They do sell and implement it. So you can certainly talk to them about it. If you had any specific questions, you could also come to me with that.